So many faces out here that I love. And I want to welcome you all and thank you all for being here. So many of you have crossed my path and touched my heart over the years. And I'm going to be telling stories, of course, with permission. So this month we've been talking about sacred service. And today I'm going to talk about the life of a practitioner, making your life a prayer. Reverend Julie defined sacred service as holding reverent. I love that. She asked how we are being in sacred service to ourselves, reminding us that how we treat ourselves is the world's invitation and how it treats us. And how we treat others is how we treat ourselves. She equated self-care with success. We looked at being in service to each other and all the benefits of that. Reverend Julie reminded us to be with each other consciously, holding the space for one another. We are not here to fix, for God is not broken. Reverend Julie has reminded us over the last few weeks that it's not love until you give it away. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, and looking back over my 20 years of service as a practitioner, I was moved by how many amazing people I have met and how many wonderful experiences I've had just by being in service. I've also realized that in serving, I have been served. And interestingly enough, this journey of serving has brought me full circle to being in service to myself, and I'm going to talk more about that here in a moment. It's an old picture, so it's a little blurry. That's me at 4 years old, sitting under my grandmother's apple tree. I loved that apple tree. And I would spend a fair amount of time sitting under that apple tree. When I found that picture, it's like, I'm even cross-legged. I was meditating before I even knew what it was. So I was aware of this connection at a very early age. When I was 5, my aunts took me to the stock show. And while, most children were buying cowboy hats and guns, and I wanted a necklace of Jesus on one side and Mary on the other. That's what I wanted. And I stared at that necklace with such love and adoration all the way home that day. I remember that. When most high school students were putting up posters of their favorite rock bands, I was hanging posters in my room of my favorite inspirational sayings and pictures of dogs and animals and birds. So I began my acts of service in high school when I became active with the American Red Cross. So that was probably an early calling to the nursing profession. Originally, I thought I wanted to be a nun. That is until I grew up in the Catholic Church, so I think that's a lot of where that came from. That is until I started to date. And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty fun too. So speaking of nuns, there were 2 nuns shopping at a 7-Eleven store. As they passed by the beer cooler, one nun said to the other, "Wouldn't a nice cool beer or 2 taste wonderful on this hot summer evening?" The second nun answered, "Indeed it would, sister, but I would not feel comfortable buying beer, since I am certain it would cause a scene at the checkout stand." "I can handle that without a problem," the other sister said. And she picked up a 6-pack and headed for the checkout. The cashier had a surprised look on his face when the 2 nuns arrived with that 6-pack of beer. "We use beer for washing our hair," the one nun said. "Back at the convent, we call it Catholic shampoo." Without blinking an eye, the cashier reached under the counter, pulled out a package of pretzel sticks, placed it in the bag with the beer, looked at the nun straight in the eye, smiled, and said, "The curlers are on the house." So what is sacred service? Webster defines sacred as consecrated to God, and service as aid, be used by, supply, be helpful. When we are in sacred service, we are being helpful and supplying in ways that are consecrated by God. Faith and prayer is the connection with God, and when that is there, so is service. I believe that sacred service is love made visible and tangible. To work without love is slavery. Khalil Gibran, one of my favorite writers who wrote The Prophet, says, "And he alone is great, who turns the voice of the wind into a song made sweeter by his own loving." This is the difference love can make. When I was teaching nursing students at Regis University, I would encourage my students to be aware of what was in their hearts before entering a patient's room. I would tell them that whatever is in your heart will come through your hands. Have you ever experienced a touch that is empty, a touch that is angry, a touch that is indifferent, a touch that is loving? They are not the same thing, are they? And there are different ways to be in service also. And so I ask you, how are you in service? How do you show up in service? You may be in service to your church, your family, your friends, your neighbors, your community, your country. And I take a moment now to just honor those who've lost their lives in service to our country and honor their families because they've experienced that loss too. You may be in service to your workplace, your children's school. This is my dear, beloved friend, Justina. And our friendship has bloomed for many, many years. We met before starting practitioner training, and our friendship blossomed during that time that we were in training, which was a good 4 years. And we have just walked the journey together. There have been times we've been on minister practitioner retreats, and her and I room together, and we'll stay up till 3 in the morning, just talking and laughing and just talking about all kinds of things. This was a time that I was honored to be in service to her when she married her wonderful husband, Glenn, as I was her matron of honor and stood up for her, of course, infusing that whole experience with lots of prayer. And then I have permission to tell this story. Several years ago, dear Justina had to have open heart surgery. And so I was in prayer with her prior to that experience. I met her and Glenn at the hospital before the crack of dawn that morning, prayed with Justina, the nurses, the doctors, including the anesthesiologist and the surgeon, and stayed with Glenn in the waiting room, and him and I were in consciousness and prayer during that whole procedure. Continued to pray for my dear friend during her recovery, and I am happy to say that she made an amazing recovery. And she too was honored several weeks ago at Mile High Church for her 20 years of service as a practitioner, so she's a practitioner emeritus. And then what about our families? The last year and a half, I was called to serve my mom. My mom was battling colon cancer. And along with my brother and his wife and my sister and her husband and, our kids, we were there for her. And sometimes that service looked like praying with her. Sometimes it looked like crying with her. Sometimes it looked like holding her hand. Sometimes I bathed her, sometimes I fed her. My sister and her husband and myself were there when she made her transition on November 17th. And so I was able to be in service to help birth her into that next expression. And yes, I miss her terribly. And there's always that human sadness, but I also know she's on to something amazingly better because it's this or something greater always. So that's me feeding my mom at hospice. I lived at hospice that last week, and that was an incredible experience. And then what about our service to our partners, our children? I think that's really important too. And this is Mark and I when at our 25th wedding anniversary. And so do you take the time to just pause and have fun together? Do you take the time to pause and really listen to one another, or notice when another one might need a little extra support? With your children, do you take the time to affirm the amazing beings that they are, to really listen to them, to encourage them when they may need encouragement, and to celebrate them when it's time to celebrate? I think our lives are pretty fast-paced nowadays, and so I'm here to invite you to take a breath and cherish these moments. Because, they're all gifts, these moments. So, think about being in service. What's the consciousness behind your service? Do you feel obligated? Are you doing it for the recognition? Do you serve wanting something in return? Or do you serve for the pure joy of being in service and giving of your gifts? The world needs all of us. It really does. And all are important to that full expression of the one. Over the years, I think I've done some of my best service quietly behind the scenes without any expectations. I believe some of the most potent service that we can all do is to give the human family a hand up. The saying goes, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a meal. You teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. It's one of the reasons I love this Science of Mind teaching. This teaching helps us to learn how to think and thus learn how to live. As Reverend Julie has often said, as she prepares for the message, opportunities come up for practice. And that was true for me this week, too. At work, I hand out gratitude cards to those who want them at the beginning of the day. They are always the perfect message, it seems. Not yesterday, it was actually Friday, I drew a card. And the card was titled, Serving the Whole. And it said, in every moment, I am given opportunities for creative service. Sometimes that service is simple witness. I count and encounter the blessings of life. I recognize and honor the dignity of those whom I meet. You never know how a simple gesture will lift someone up. It could be the person at the grocery store. It could be the person that just cut in front of you in traffic. I always bless them on their progression with peace and joy. Last week I was talking with a patient who has a history of being angry and not so nice. And honestly, the human part of me had about enough, to be honest. And I was ready to crown her. But instead, I prayed, the God in me communicates and connects with the God in you. And you know what? The conversation I had with her went better than ever. So as you leave today, I have an angel card for each of you. They'll be in the basket. So be sure to pick a card. No peeking. It'll be the perfect word for you. And I encourage you to take that and be with that word and just see what the message is for you this week. Okay? My gift to you. Today we are acknowledging our practitioners whose life is the path of sacred service. Did you know that ministers, or at least most ministers, are practitioners before becoming ministers? And we are so blessed at our spiritual center here in Castle Rock. We have a dynamic, loving, committed group of practitioners, and I'm including you in that group, Reverend Julie. They're amazing people to serve with. And many of my friends and dear colleagues from Mile High are here today too, and I include you in that group too. So many of you are probably wondering, what is a practitioner? Our founder, Ernest Holmes, says, the one who attempts to heal himself or another through a recognition of the creative power of mind and the ever availability of good is a mental or spiritual practitioner. Such a one refuses to allow negative thoughts to control his consciousness. He endeavors to greet the divinity in every person he or she meets. The professional, mental, and spiritual practitioner is one who has dedicated his life, his time, his energies, his intelligence to helping others through mental and spiritual means and practices. As a practitioner, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect by any means, because I too am a spiritual being, like all of you, having this human experience. But what it does mean, and what it has taught me, is to be aware. And so I notice when I've moved away from my center, and I come back pretty quickly. And that's been one of the gifts of this journey as practitioner. As a practitioner, I had 4 years of training originally, and I think it's more now. The learning really began, I believe, when I started my practice as a licensed practitioner. That's when I really started to, the rubber met the road. So this is a picture of me praying with someone in the first prayer and guidance center at Mile High Church. And the founding mother, Carol Buxton, is here with us today. And I was one of the early practitioners in that center. It was an amazing way to serve. Practitioners are licensed and are required to renew their licenses every 2 years and meet a certain number of service hours and continuing education units. You may have not known that. A significant part of this path is doing our own work, looking at beliefs or practices that do not serve the higher truth, ourselves, or one another. Relearning ways of being and doing in some cases are necessary. Being religious about our spiritual practices and nurturing the divine connection on a continual basis is vital to being a practitioner. And I have been known to say, if you're too busy to pray, you're too busy. So Lao Tzu, I have a couple of things here that I want to share with you, says it pretty perfectly. Lao Tzu says, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Sometimes we just need to choose another vehicle. One evening, my husband and I went out to dinner with my sister and her husband. We had a wonderful meal, conversation, and laughter. When we were leaving, it was snowing, blizzarding. It was really a blizzard, actually. So our husbands went to get the cars. Having difficulty seeing in the blizzard and just wanting to get out of the cold and the snow, I ran to the car and jumped in the front seat and was met by a strange voice that said, "Well, hello there." I had gotten into the wrong car. So, have you ever found yourself in the wrong vehicle? Yes. Wrong relationship, wrong job, wrong channel of expression, whatever the case may be. What do you do about it? Well, that particular night, I said, "Oh, sorry, wrong car, have a great night." And I proceeded to get in my car, go to my car, walking past my sister's car, she was laughing hysterically at me. Got into the right car, and Mark's like, "What in the heck are you doing?" Oh, so then, there's times, too, on our life path where things may not seem clear. One day, Mark and I were skiing with our friends, Reverend Raz and his beloved Tina. It was a sunny, cold February day there at Copper Mountain. We stopped for lunch, and I proceeded to pull out my lip gloss, and I was piling it on because my lips were dry. So all over my lips, all around my lips. Reverend Raz was sitting across the table from me, and he was looking at me with this look of, "Oh my God." I leaned forward mid-swipe, paused, and I whispered, "It's not clear, is it?" And he goes, and then, amidst the laughter, I heard Mark go, "Lucy." So when things aren't clear, a practitioner can help. And They can help guide you to places of clarity and through prayer and visioning, meditation, journaling, and other spiritual tools. I would like to take a moment now to acknowledge my practitioner, Sadie. And her husband are traveling this weekend, so she's here in consciousness with us. I've been working with Sadie for over 20 years, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, sometimes as needed. Sadie has walked the journey with me every step of the way. She has celebrated with me, sat with me through my times of divine discontent, laughed with me, cried with me, prayed with me, visioned with me. And oftentimes, I want to go to that point of divine discontent, because what I have learned is that those moments often are the impetus for our next breakthrough. It's like little children, when they're ready to go to that next developmental stage, they're a little more fussy before they do that. My little grandson Brody was trying so hard. He was on all fours, trying so hard to crawl, just couldn't quite get it, and he's like, he was frustrated, but he's almost there. So Sadie always holds up the mirror lovingly, always. Gently reminding me of my highest truth when sometimes I forget, or maybe those times I'm just not able to do it for myself. So today I'm holding up the mirror to you. And of course this has our Signs of Mind symbol on it, but this mirror also says, I am the face of God. I am pre-approved. So I want to say to you, you are the face of God, each and every one of you. You are pre-approved. There's no original sin, people. There's just original blessings, because we're all the special and unique expressions of that one divine life that is God. I'd like to also acknowledge my prayer partner and dear soul sister, Ara. Ara and I have been meeting by phone for years in the early morning to pray for one another, our loved ones, to remind each other of the spiritual truth in any situation. And one night I just happened to get a call at 9:30, and I happened to be there, and I picked it up, and it was Ara. And she was really upset because her son had just been in a serious car accident. In fact, they were using the jaws of life to get him out. And she was driving to the hospital. And I remember, and it gives me God bumps this day to think about it, and I remember just feeling for my sister and also praying her all the way to the hospital. And Josh is doing great. So filling our cups, I want to say a little bit about that, is so important so we can give from that place of overflow. Mother Teresa says that to keep the lamp burning, you have to put oil in it. It is not so much what we do or how much we do, but how much love we put into it that matters. Remembering who we truly are as unique expressions of the divine and nurturing our temples with gentleness, quiet, good nutrition, exercise, rest, spiritual practices. This is not selfish. This is essential. Make time for quiet moments, unplugged from technology. For God whispers and the world is loud. I remember when I got the call to be a practitioner, I was working the night shift at Porter Hospital. I was charting on a patient, and that still small voice said, go through prac training. And I was like, what? Me? That was my first reaction, and I kept saying, go through prac training, practitioner training. So I've learned over the years to listen to that still small voice, and I did, and I am so glad I did. We are what we bring to the world. We are what we bring to the world, and the world needs each and every one of us. So we need to love ourselves first and then bring love into our homes. This is where our love for each other must start. And I'd like to take this time to honor my family. A lot of them are here today. I'm so in love with them all. And this is my beloved husband, Mark. And he's been with me also every step of the way, supporting, loving, willing to accompany me as I try new things. I've drug him several places. And oh, so patient. Our journey has experienced its ups and downs in that human experience for sure. We've been teachers for each other. And I'm really grateful for you, Mark. Really grateful for you. In our early years of marriage, Mark would go to church with me on Christmas and Easter. And then one year I realized he was going to church with me most of the time, and I asked him why he started going to church more often, and he replied, "I like the changes I've seen in you since you've been going to Mile High Church and studying the Science of Mind principles." He reminds me that God really is a hoot. He's really funny. And that this life can and should be fun. You know, my childhood was not always easy, and sometimes I would forget the joy and the fun part. But that really is a big part of it. In July, we'll be celebrating 36 years of marriage. And my dear sweet mother-in-law is here too. She's like another mother to me. So, then my children. I'd like to honor my children and their spouses. And they have children of their own now, so I am the lucky grandmother of 3. They all are the love and light of my life. Do you see yourself up there, Jakey? Yeah. When you are in the midst of parenting, with the daily thousands of things to do for others and the sleepless nights, it is easy to lose sight about the purpose of what I believe is the most important service on the planet. And that's serving our children. And whether you're a biological parent or not, how we serve our children is crucial. For upcoming generations. The Lakota have a belief that they encourage us to think 7 generations out. I love that. When you observe your children grow up, give of their gifts, be in loving relationships, and be loving parents, the rewards of that fill your heart, making the sleepless nights and sometimes the challenges of raising children a true blessing. I love my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law like my own. My children chose so wisely. And we've been blessed by our expanded family because now their family is our family. And what a blessing that is. We have so much fun together, especially when we share those grandchildren. Hearing my son, the tough hockey player, call his daughter sweetheart makes my heart smile. So in addition to knowing and seeing the goodness of God in all, the practitioner uses the tool of prayer. Prayer is not begging or bargaining with a higher power. Prayer is that recognition and unification with that presence that is the very essence of our being. And let's not forget our 4-legged and our winged. For that God essence is in them too. Prayer is knowing that all that God is, we are. Prayer is remembering and trusting that God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. Have you ever been in a situation where you questioned that? I have. And yet when I look back, it is so true. It's like I see the goodness of God even in some tough situations. One of my favorite prayers of all times is the prayer of St. Francis. So I'm going to invite you right now to just close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, and just take this prayer in. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is dying that we are born into eternal life. I've seen the miracle of prayer over and over during my life as a practitioner, and even before that, actually. My very first client that I saw as a practitioner was a minister who had found her husband after he committed suicide. I remember praying, God, show me what to do and tell me what to say, for I'm at a loss here. The truth is, it is the divine working through us as its channel. God does the healing. I listened a lot that morning and was told that my prayer was comforting. One of the most profound experiences I had with prayer was when my daughter Lauren was 1 week old. I was concerned she was not nursing as well and got up at 4 a.m. to check on her. As I was changing her diaper, I noticed that she had a high fever and she stopped breathing. I resuscitated Lauren, and we ended up in the intensive care nursery where I was taking my leave from. The doctors were telling us she might not live. I was studying Science Mind 2 at the time at Mile High Church and called the church for prayer support. Dear Dr. Rogers showed up that night and prayed with us. And you know what? Lauren turned the corner and went home 1 week later. Those two still have a special connection, and he married her and Bryce 2.5 years ago. Woohoo. So sometimes, life takes us on a journey we do not expect. Have you ever been there? It's like, oh, how'd I get here? One Saturday, I had an appointment at the south end of town. I found myself caught in heavy traffic, uncommon to Castle Rock. I rolled down my window to talk with an officer explaining my need to get to this appointment on time and asking how I might accomplish this mission through all this traffic. He moved a barrier and motioned me to go right, which I did. And I found myself between two floats in the Douglas County Fair Parade. So people were looking at me curiously as I proceeded down Wilcox Street. And I had my God is my source sign in my window and felt like that's all I needed. So I rolled down my window and started waving. And in the meantime, Mark's calling, going, where are you? You've been gone so long. I go, you won't believe it. So I enjoyed where I was planted that day. As a practitioner, and some of you are here today, I've sat with you and prayed, I've visioned with you. We've created together. I've prayed with many, been at the bedside of those in hospitals and those making their transition. I've spoken at memorial service, performed marriage renewal ceremonies, written programs, participated in creating a CD, planned and facilitated retreats and workshops, visioned with individuals, couples, and organizations, always facilitating that remembering and knowing of that person or that organization's highest purpose. I've led women on meditative snowshoe treks, hiking expeditions, hut trips, and climbing 14ers. I met our dear Mara on one of those trips. Yeah, that hat there embarrassed my family terribly. I've hiked and rafted the Grand Canyon twice as a spiritual journey and could do a whole talk or two about that adventure and lessons learned. Last week Reverend Julie mentioned about moving out of our comfort zones. On my first trip in the Grand Canyon, I chose to be on the paddle boat, where all 6 of us paddled in addition to the guide. Part of our orientation was to fall out of the raft and be rescued. Well, I was great at rescuing and sat quietly, not volunteering to be rescued. Anybody identify with that? You see, I had a near-death experience when I was 20 years old. I almost drowned because I was caught under a sailboat. Larry, our guide on that raft, insisted I fall out. The upcoming rapids sounded so loud and ominous, and I'll tell you, I was really scared. Well, I practiced defiant compliance. I fell out of the raft while holding on to the rope line of the raft, which what I know now is a very dangerous thing to do because it pulls you under the raft. And over the roar of the rapids and the rushing of the water, I kept hearing Larry yell, "Cindy, let go of the raft, let go of the raft." And then again, that still small voice within me was going, "Let go, let go, let go." And I felt like Larry knew what he was doing, and I trusted him, so I let go. And in that moment, it was very cathartic for me. I experienced such a sense of release, of fear, and peace that I don't think I've ever known. And I've carried it with me to this day. So I've learned from each of you and from all of these experiences. You know, we're here together learning from one another. It's made my life rich beyond my wildest imagination. For 5 years, Mark and I served the Lakota in their Sundance celebration with our dear friends Dr. Patty, Luke, and Bonnie, Bryce's mom, my son-in-law's mom. I learned so much from my Lakota family. They're so rich in spirit and culture. And this is Chief Homer on the left with his grandson. And then this is one of the little girls that I just fell in love with on the reservation. One day on the reservation, we were warned a tornado was close, and it looked like it could happen any moment. We could go to our cars or we could go to our tents. There was really no other place to go. But instead, we found ourselves in the sweat lodge. Now, the sweat lodge is where the Native Americans sing their prayers and hold ceremony. It's a very prayerful ceremony. Many of the children were frightened and gathered around me, and I have to tell you, I wasn't exactly without fear in that moment. But I heard myself saying, "Let's just sing our prayers. We're safe in here." So we sang our prayers, and you know what? We were safe in there. Another day on the reservation, I had just finished an hour in meditation and prayer. On the reservation, like I've said, we live in tents on the dry prairie. The days are usually very hot, and it can be really windy. People are not addressed by name. Instead, we call each other uncle, grandmother, sister. And when I started going up there, I was aunt, and then one year I graduated to grandmother, and I'm like, how did that happen? I was walking across the dry, grassy field to wish one of my brothers happy birthday. I felt something stinging my leg, looked down, and noticed that my skirt was on fire. Fire, flames coming up my skirt. To this day, I'm not sure how it caught fire. There's some guesses, but we're really not sure. People were panicked, yelling, "Drop and roll." And I knew, my inner wisdom knew that if I dropped and rolled, we'd all be on fire. And so I slowly and calmly moving over to the water tank, trying to get out of my skirt, when one of the team volunteers from Switzerland, a trained firefighter, I might tell you, ripped off my skirt and stomped out the flames. And there I stood in my underwear. My thought was never, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be burned." I never had that thought. Instead, what I was aware of was, I'm so glad I listened to my mother and I've got clean underwear on. Interestingly enough and curiously, I did not have one burn on me, even though my skirt was in flames. And I felt it. Boy, I felt it. And when it would come to lighting the pipe, the Lakota would jokingly say and wink, "Go ask Cindy." So as I close, I am filled with gratitude for this journey as a practitioner. I'm grateful for each of you. Each of you. You've touched my life. And I'm so glad you're here today to celebrate with me. I'm grateful that I learned that being in service is a blessing and joy beyond belief. I'm grateful that I have learned that there is nothing or no one to fix, for God is not broken. I've learned to trust that divine and perfect pattern, to have faith in the way things are. I hold sacred the space for those I pray for, and those that I pray for I hold sacred. For when we serve, we're serving God. I see each day as a wonderful gift and often wonder how I will be called into service and prayer at the dawn of each new day. And I ask you, how are you being called to serve? What gifts do you have to give? Remember, it's not love until you give it away. And speaking of that, I want to just give huge thanks to Mark for helping me with the audio visuals today. A lot of time and work went into that, and I really appreciate that. So what gifts do you have to give? Are you courageous enough to be served? Do you make time to pray? To align with that guides and expresses through and as you? Do you make time for that? It's as important as brushing your teeth. We are here for one another. We are here to serve. And when we serve God. And as Reverend Julie said last week, when we move into unconditional love, all is divine. Let us pray.